The first shots sounded like the popping of corks, absurdly small noises for a war. The two Lewis guns opened up on the advance guard of the enemy force, a ragged line of gray-brown figures cresting the ridge. They were swift, they were legion, and they were utterly, devastatingly indifferent to the machine gun fire churning the red dust around their clawed feet. Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery, a veteran of the Great War, watched in mounting disbelief. He had faced the Ottoman army at Gallipoli, but here, in the Campion district of Western Australia, in November 1932, he was facing something for which no military manual had prepared him. Dromaeus Nova Hollandiae, the emu, and he was losing. This was the Great Emu War. It was not a metaphor, not a satire, but an actual government-sanctioned military operation. And in its staggering absurdity lies a profound story of human hubris, ecological irony, and a battle against a feathered foe that was, in its own primal way, undefeatable. It is a tale that begins not with a bang, but with a whisper of hope across the ocean, and ends with a lesson written in the dry soil of a continent that has always defied conquest. The stage was set by global tragedy and promise. In the wake of World War I, the Australian government, flush with a sense of patriotic duty and expansionist ambition, launched a soldier settlement scheme. Thousands of veterans, many shell-shocked and weary, were gifted parcels of marginal land in Western Australia. The promise was pastoral paradise. Clear the tough scrub, plant wheat, and build a new, prosperous life. The government helped by clearing vast tracts and promising infrastructure that was often slow to arrive. These men, who had survived the horrors of trench warfare, now faced a different kind of battle, against a harsh, unyielding landscape. By 1929, their hopes were sown. Over 40,000 acres of newly cleared land waved with wheat. Then the world collapsed. The Great Depression crashed over the globe and wheat prices plummeted. The government's promised subsidies vanished. The veterans, already deeply in debt for their land and equipment, faced financial ruin. And as they stared at their withering fields, contemplating a hunger born of economic catastrophe, a different kind of hunger descended from the arid outback. The emu is a magnificent, prehistoric creature. Standing over 6 feet tall, built for endurance, capable of sprinting at 30 miles per hour and covering vast distances, it is a living relic of Gondwana. Each year, with ancient, ingrained precision, emus migrate from the arid interior to the coastal plains after breeding. Their route was a millennia-old highway. In 1932, that highway now ran directly through tens of thousands of acres of succulent, irrigated wheat. To the emus, it was not a farm, it was a serendipitous bonanza, a vast, open-air restaurant laid on by forces they could not comprehend. An army of roughly 20,000 birds descended upon the struggling farms. They moved in disciplined, chaotic flocks. A fence was no obstacle. Their powerful legs could trample a 5-foot wire fence without breaking stride. They drank the settlers' precious water, devoured their crops, and left gaping holes in their fields where the strong, clawed feet had ripped the plants from the earth. A single emu could eat vast quantities in a day. For the farmers, already clinging to the edge of existence, this was the final feathered straw. They were not being inconvenienced, they were being erased. Desperation breeds radical pleas. A delegation of ex-soldier farmers petitioned the Minister of Defense, Sir George Pearce. They knew the language of soldiers. They spoke of an invading army, of heavy losses, of the need for immediate military aid. Sir George, a senator from Western Australia, saw a politically expedient solution. Here was a chance to assist worthy veterans, employ the military in a domestic role, and perhaps even provide a public relations boost by showcasing the Army's utility. He also saw a chance to test some of the Army's machine guns. He approved the operation.
The emus had declared war, and the Australian government, bafflingly, decided to accept.
Thus entered Major Meredith, a competent and disciplined officer, equipped with 2 soldiers, 2 Lewis guns, and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The media, sensing the sublime ridiculousness of it all, gleefully attached war correspondents. The Emu War was headline news before a single bird had fallen. On November 2, 1932, the military mobilized. The plan was simple, even elegant. The farmers would herd the emus into an area where the machine guns could achieve enfilading fire, cutting them down in great, decisive swaths. It was a tactic from the fields of Flanders, applied to the scrub of Campion. The first engagement was a portent of farce. A flock of about 50 birds was sighted, and expertly herded towards the gun emplacement. The soldiers held their fire until the range was optimal. Then the Lewis guns chattered, and then they jammed. The emus, startled by the noise, splintered into a dozen small, sprinting groups, each bird a zigzagging 6-foot-tall target of astonishing speed and resilience. Even when hit, an emu's body is remarkably tough. Many could absorb bullets and keep running, only to die miles away. The first day's score was minimal. Meredith remained optimistic, blaming the jam on faulty ammunition. The following days unfolded like a bleak comedy. The emus refused to behave like an army. They had no generals, no tactics, only an evolutionary genius for survival. They employed guerrilla warfare avant la lettre. They broke into small, unmanageable units. They ran in chaotic, unpredictable patterns. They used the landscape, thick scrub, gullies, rocky outcrops as perfect cover. The soldiers, weighed down by heavy gear and military formalism, found themselves engaged in an exhausting, demoralizing chase. They tried mounting a Lewis gun on a truck, envisioning a mobile platform for pursuit. This resulted in a wild, bumpy ride over impossible terrain, the gunner unable to aim as the truck lurched, trying and mostly failing to hit birds that outpaced them with ease. The truck, it was said, eventually broke down after hitting a gully too hard. Newspapers, particularly in the eastern states and overseas, ate it up. The Sydney Morning Herald ran witty editorials. British papers portrayed it as the quintessential example of Australian eccentricity. The conservationist movement, still in its infancy, began to murmur about the cruelty of it all. But for Meredith and his men, the humor was wearing thin. They were sweating under the brutal sun, chasing phantoms, and expending vast amounts of ammunition for a pitiful return. One widely reported incident saw the gunners setting up an ambush near a local dam. 1,000 emus were spotted advancing. With perfect timing, the gunners waited until the horde was in point-blank range. The guns opened up, and the emus, in a display of preternatural cool, simply turned and ran, their numbers and speed allowing the majority to escape unscathed. The battle was a spectacular failure. After 6 days, with only a few hundred birds confirmed killed and his ammunition dwindling, Major Meredith called a retreat. He reported to the minister that the emus had proven impossible to engage with military efficiency. If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, he quipped with a soldier's dark humor, it would face any army in the world. They can face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks. The first campaign was over. The emus had won. The farmers, however, renewed their pleas. The emu scourge was worse than ever. Politically embarrassed, Minister Pearce re-engaged. Meredith returned to the field on November 12,
this time with a more pragmatic, less grandiose approach. He operated more like a grimly determined pest controller than a field commander. He chose his ground more carefully, set up ambushes near waterholes, and used local farmers as scouts. The kill rate improved. Over the course of a month, Meredith's unit claimed approximately 986 kills. The Army's official report stated that 2,500 rounds had been expended for every 100 birds killed, a spectacularly poor cost-benefit ratio. By early December, even the stubborn Meredith had to concede the campaign was unsustainable. The military withdrew, permanently. The final tally was debated, but the outcome was undeniable. The emus had not been defeated. Their migration continued. Their numbers remained robust. The government, in a stunning about-face, decided to switch tactics. They would not match the emu's strength with bullets, but with its own instincts. In the years that followed, the much-maligned emu bounty system, which had existed before the war, was dramatically strengthened and formalized. The government incentivized the farmers themselves. They built long, strong boundary fences, not to keep emus out entirely, but to funnel them. They set up ambush points along these fences, where professional shooters paid per head could call the birds efficiently. Most crucially, they provided free ammunition. It was a deviously effective strategy. It employed locals, cost the government far less than a military deployment, and harnessed the intimate knowledge of the land that the farmers possessed. By the late 1930s, tens of thousands of bounties were being claimed annually. The problem was managed not through a war of annihilation, but through a grim, sustained campaign of economic incentivization. The Great Emu War faded from the headlines, becoming a quirky footnote, a joke about silly Australians and sillier birds. But to dismiss it as mere farce is to miss its profound resonance. It is a parable of the Anthropocene. Here was modern, industrial humanity, armed with the tools that had recently decided the fate of empires, attempting to impose its will on an ancient natural pattern. And it failed, utterly. The emu was not a peer opponent. It was a force of nature, an animal whose evolutionary strategy of resilience, speed, and sheer numbers was perfectly adapted to the Australian environment. The soldiers, for all their training and technology, were the aliens here, trying to fight the land itself. For the American audience, the story sings a familiar, cautionary tune. It echoes the hubris of the campaign against the bison on the Great Plains, an attempt to control a continent by eradicating its keystone species. It whispers of the unintended consequences of the Dust Bowl, where aggressive farming practices met unforgiving ecology. It is a tale of settlers, veterans no less, trying to carve a dream from a land that operates on its own timeless, indifferent logic. The emu today is not endangered. It thrives. It is a protected species. Its image adorns the Australian coat of arms alongside a kangaroo, a symbol of a nation that moves forward but never surrenders. The Great Emu War endures not as a story of human victory, but of nature's quiet, unstoppable persistence. It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful enemy is not one that hates you, but one that simply stubbornly refuses to acknowledge your war in the first place. In the end, the farmers learned to live with the emu, not conquer it. And the emu, that living fossil from a world before humans, continued its ancient march, a feathered ghost dancing through the machine gun fire of history, utterly, magnificently unconcerned.